Hi guys, today we will be discussing about the fat metabolism process and we will be bifurcate this fat metabolism in 2 or 3 lecture videos. So as you know that in food items we are taking fats as a major component, food component and before discussing about the actual metabolic process, we will see some of the things for the digestion and mobilization and the transportation along with the metabolic process. Actually, the metabolic process starts when the fats transported in the cell and basically metabolic process that take place in mitochondrial region for the fats. So, first of all, uh, the process. Digestion process actually uh, uh, starts when the fats reaches into the small intestine. The stomach that doesn't participate too much in the digestion process of the fat. The major digestion that take place in the small intestine. Now, small intestine have several uh, secretions from the gall bladder, liver, internal secretions from the small intestine, then pancreatic secretion containing the pancreatic lipase. So all of these that are important for the digestion of the fats into the small intestine. What does this secretion coming from the gallbladder that is doing here? That is actually doing the process of emulsification. As you know, that the fats are not water soluble. So the bile acid and the bile salts coming from it that participate in the emulsification process in the small intestine. Then intestinal lipase. Intestinal lipase is secreted from the intestine, and what is the purpose? That is breaking down the triglyceride. Basically, when we are taking the fat that is in the form of the triglyceride, means three fatty acid is attached with the glycerol molecule that will be called as a triglyceride. So when we are taking the fat in our diet that is in the form of triglyceride and the enzyme responsible for breaking off these triglycerides, that is the lipases. So one of the enzyme is the intestinal lipases that is breaking down the triglyceride into the fatty acids and glycerol. Then these fatty acids and other breakdown products are taken by the intestinal mucosa and converted into triglycerides again. So these triglycerides are incorporated with cholesterol and apolipoproteins into the chylomicrons. So these are the chylomicrons, these are the small particles of lipoprotein that is responsible for transporting all the fats and lipids across the body to reach, to help them reach into the cells where the fats are required. So the chylomicrons move throughout the lymphatic system and bloodstream system moving the fats to the tissues. So one of the enzyme that is called as lipoprotein lipase that is activated by ApoC in the capillary that release fatty acids and cholesterol. So separating the fatty acid and the cholesterol, and the fatty acid is actually moving towards tissues. Then fatty acids enters into the cells, and in the cell, as I told you earlier, the mitochondrial region is the place where the metabolic process of fat take place through the beta oxidation process. So that's the whole story of digestion, mobilization, transportation up to the metabolic process, before the metabolic process. So what is emulsification? We talked about fats are not water soluble, so made into the bile salts that are absorbed as micelles in small intestine. And as I told earlier, that all of the fats and lipids and cholesterol that is involved in a lipoprotein, so that is called as the chylomicrons, and these are responsible for transportation of the all lipids, fats, and cholesterols. So when that are in the chylomicron and that are transported, so extra fats that get stored into the adipose tissues. Role of hormones. What is the role of hormones? So as you know that most of the fat that is now stored into the adipose tissue, and that will be used when you are not getting energy from carbohydrates. Your carbohydrate reserves is minimized, or when there is not a well-fed condition, or there is a starving condition, or there is a fasting condition. So some of in that fasting condition, some of the hormones that will be activated and that can mobilize the fat from the adipose tissue, because now it's the time to get the energy from the fats. So under the control of the hormones, the fats are mobilized from the adipose tissue. As a result of that, fatty acids are released. What are the hormones that are working at that time? Epinephrine and glucagon. As you know that glucagon is the hormone that is produced during fasting condition. So during fasting condition, when epinephrine and glucagon are released, that will help in the formation of CAMP. And the formation of CAMP is a triggering step. It's a triggering step for release of the fatty acids from the adipose tissues. So the triglycerides in the adipose tissue that is converting into fatty acid and the glycerol, and that will be helping into the mobilizing of the fats. So look at this one animation. I will show an animation that will tell you how this all process that is going to happen. So let me 1 minute only to start the internet so that you can have the animation process. So what is happening here? Look at this one. These are the triglyceride. This is the glycerol part. This is the three fatty acid. These are the three fatty acids. So this is called as the triglyceride. And so when you take it, this is the fats part. So the fats that is in the form of the triglyceride molecules. So look at this one. Minimum digestion process is contributing for fats here into the stomach, and small intestine is involved for this process. So when you are taking the food continuously that contain the fats into it, that is coming into that part, into the small intestine part. So look at this one. So that's come into the small intestine part, and that is getting enveloped. You can see the bile, what is the bile acid and bile salt that is playing the role. So that is actually going to emulsify that in the form of the micelles. So look at this one, that is making envelop that contain triglycerol, that contain nonpolar substances, that contain fat soluble substances, that contain cholesterol, and so on. So now it's moved, and this is the mucosa part. Before it moves, you can see that is shortened. The fatty acids are removed. You can see three fatty acids and one glycerol. The fatty acids have been removed from the glycerol part, so that now that can be getting absorbed into the mucosa of the small intestine. Mucosa is the part from where that will be getting absorbed. So look, you can see here there are several things. Glycerol is separated, apoprotein is here, fatty acids are separated, cholesterol is here. So all of that will be enveloped into the chylomicron form so that it can be transported into the bloodstream. So there, that is getting enveloped, and when that is getting enveloped in the, that is in the form of a lipoprotein, and that whole structure that will be now called as chylomicrons. This chylomicron have various substances including the triacylglycerol, that also including the apolipoproteins, that also including the part of the cholesterol. So that is actually now transported from the internal mucosa. So look at this one. Under the well-fed condition, when the I will tell you that during the well-fed condition, the insulin in the body is at rise, that is in high amounts. So under the well-fed condition, when the insulin is at rise, this will be all the additional fat that will be going to the adipose tissues, and that will stored in the adipose tissue. The fat will be stored into the adipose tissues. So you can see here all of that fats that is now getting absorbed and that is transporting, now that is coming into the adipose sites, right? Adipose tissues. You can see that breakdown again and stored fat, right, in the form of fat. So that will stored here and not will be not utilized until there will be starving or fasting condition. So under the fasting condition, that will goes into the myocytes tissues, and that will be oxidized through beta oxidation process to give the energy. But under the well-fed condition, when the insulin is at rise, that will be stored into the adipocytes. So these are the two fates, either the well-fed condition, either the fasting condition. Under the fasting condition, that will go into the myocyte to give the energy, but if there is a well-fed condition and insulin rise, that will be storing into the adipose tissues. So under the now we have started with the under the fasting condition. When the, as I told you earlier, under the fasting condition, when the glucagon hormone is at rise, what will happen? The energy will be taken from the fats. So what will be happening at that time? The stored fat will now goes into the blood vessel, that will be transported to the tissues. For example, the myocyte, that is transported into the myocytes, muscle cells for ATP energy. So what will be happening here now? So look at this one, the triacylglycerol from the adipose tissue that is transported into the blood vessel, that is the blood vessel, and the blood vessel that will be transporting into the various myocyte tissues, right? So look at this one, what is happening? First of all, the mobilization. So as I told you earlier, under the two hormones, epinephrine or glucagon, when these two hormones are at rise, elevated level, what will happen? These hormones that will attach with certain receptors. You can see here, these are the hormone blue color that are combining with the receptors, right? So first epinephrine or glucagon, both hormones, leaves the bloodstream and binds to the receptor molecule found in the cell membrane of the adipocyte. So when it binds with the specific receptor, that will activate the adenylate cyclase. It's an enzyme, adenylate cyclase. And as a result of that, when it becomes active, when it will be active, when the hormone that will combine with the receptor, so that will be active, and as a result of its activation, CAMP is formed. CAMP is, as I told you earlier, CAMP formation of the CAMP is the triggering point. It's the triggering point for separation of the for activation of the whole system. So this allow adenylate cyclase to convert ATP into CAMP. You can see here. Now what will happen? As I told you, now the cascade of reaction has started. Cascade of reaction means from one reaction there are several reactions that will be initiated. The formation of the CMP, there is a cascade of the reaction. So when this CMP is formed due to this activity, that will going to attach with protein kinase. Protein kinase that was present there in inactivate form, that is not doing their work. So when this CMP is formed, that will be attached with kinase. So triggering the reaction, triggering the function of kinase enzyme. As I told you earlier in the mid-course, kinase is associated with phosphorylation process. So now the CMP binds to protein kinase and activates it. So look at this one. This CMP kinase complex that will binds with lipase enzyme, and lipase was again that was in the inactivate form, but when it combines, because you know kinase is going to phosphorylate it, you can see it. So this lipase is get phosphorylated, and when it get phosphorylated, this lipase, when it get phosphorylated, it becomes active. Otherwise that was in the inactive in the adipose tissue. You can say that lipase when dephosphorylated, that will be inactivated in the adipose tissues. So now the activated protein kinase proceed to bind the triacylglycerol lipase, thereby activating it. So any triacylglycerol molecule that will be coming here, that will be breaking down the triacylglycerol in the adipose tissues, so that the glycerol will be separated and the fatty acid that will be separated. So this is the whole story how that is working under the hormone control. So once activated, the triacylglycerol lipase is able to break the triacylglycerol into the fatty acid components. So you can see that these fatty acids that will go into the bloodstream, and in the bloodstream, serum albumin that will be the carrier for these fatty acids. So you know the albumin is a protein, so it's a lipoprotein complex now. Albumin will be the carrier of these fatty acids. So that will be carried into the myocyte. You can see that is carried into the myocyte. The serum albumin travels throughout the blood vessel and release the fatty acid molecule in the myocytes. And here, as I told you earlier, in the myocyte, that will go into the mitochondrial region, and beta oxidation will oxidize this one and give the energy, provide the energy. Okay, now review all of that process. First of all, this is the triglyceride molecule. This is the cholesterol molecule. Both are the fatty substances. The triacylglycerol in the food are not soluble in water. Thus, bile salts like cholate and glycocholate must solve them to make them more accessible to water. Soluble enzymes such as lipase, bile salts surrounds the nonpolar fatty acid and orient them their hydrophobic and charged groups towards surrounding water molecule, dramatically increasing the triacylglycerol solubility. So in the small intestine, we have talked about the lipase function, that is breaking the fatty acids, breaking the triglycerol into fatty acid and glycerol molecule. And this fatty acid is absorbed into the intestinal mucosa. We have talked about this type of substances, how that is separated and making the envelope of the chylomicron. It's a lipoprotein. You can see apoprotein C, you can see triglyceride molecules, you can see fatty acids, right? You can see cholesterol molecules. So it's chylomicron, helps in transportation. You can read all of these details from here. So all of these I have told you, phospholipids in the membrane system, especially free cholesterol, cholesterol esters, triacylglycerol, apolipoprotein, all of this in chylomicron. So That's all for today. Thank you very much. We will be continue this lecture in another video lecture. Thank you very much.